Are you okay, Frank? Okay. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize the city's elected officials that are with us here today. The Yonkers Minority Leader of the Yonkers City Council, Mike Sabatino, the City Councilman from the 1st District, Christopher Johnson. We have Deputy Mayors with us from Gary. We have Police Commissioner Chuck Gardner, Fire Commissioner Bob Sweeney, the Yonkers Housing and Buildings Commissioner Bill Schneider. There's been a lot of misinformation over the last few days regarding the homeless shelters in downtown Yonkers, and specifically who is responsible for them, what's been occurring there, the conditions, and most importantly, the safety of those who seek refuge there. Let's be clear. First, these shelters are the sole jurisdiction of Westchester County and are funded by county taxpayers, county tax dollars that we as Yonkers residents pay. Also funded with federal and state grants. Over the last few weeks, there have been a number of instances that have occurred in downtown Yonkers that have forced this administration to take a look at the conditions of these facilities. Namely, the stabbing and the murder of 49-year-old Clarence Van Hook a few days ago in broad daylight in Getty Square. We also, on Friday, had an overdose of a woman in our Yonkers Public Library in close proximity, obviously, to where our children read and spend time. Both of whom were supposed residents of the shelters. Our attention has been drawn to these facilities, and what we've seen is deplorable. Inhumane conditions include structural deficiencies, dead vermin, unsanitary spaces, little or no light, fire hazards caused by faulty and exposed wiring, and overloaded electrical outlets, combustible objects near the boiler, soot residue which would imply that there's carbon monoxide being released, and the list goes on. But even more alarming is the overcrowding that is occurring because the county shelters are warehousing our region's homeless. In some cases, packing over 50 people into spaces that have been allotted for 18. Ironically, it was 2 years ago that the county closed its Mount Vernon facility because of what they said there was excess capacity. So I don't know what's happened in 2 years. It's certainly a question that needs to be answered. And while the county is responsible for managing these facilities, the city can't, in good conscience, ignore the housing conditions and the obligations to the health and safety of these individuals and all of our residents. In fact, one of the shelters located at 101 Broadway had its temporary residence permit denied in 2014 because of numerous code violations. You can read some of them right there. The building is condemned, and yet the county has chosen to continue to house people there. Despite reaching out to the county to remedy these conditions, they continue to ignore them. Just this past Friday, instead of fixing the living conditions, the county secured a court order to prevent the city from entering the shelter at 101 Broadway to access its conditions. Imagine that. That instead of sending carpenters and maybe electricians and maintenance people to make sure that that facility is humane for people to live in, they chose to send a county cop and told our first responders, including our firefighter, which was there because of overcrowding, so it means that they had to do a fire watch, which is something we do on a regular basis in the city, and they were told, stay outside. Like I said, they had a county police officer positioned outside the building to prevent our housing and building inspectors and the Yonkers firefighters from entering to assess conditions and to conduct that fire watch. And let me also clear up something else. At no point over the last 3 days did the city raid the positions. The city had someone from the building department, somebody from the police department, somebody from the fire department there to check what were some of the complaints that we've been hearing about for so long. As a matter of fact, the city went there one day, Friday. And on Friday, while they were told that they were over capacity. At no point did anyone in this administration ask that those facilities be vacated. The city has a fiduciary responsibility to the safety and the security of our residents, including the homeless. On Friday, our building department entered to evaluate the conditions, and again, no one was asked to vacate the premises. Also on Friday, the county signed a 5-month agreement with the property owners so it can continue serving as a shelter despite addressing the unsafe conditions. Imagine that. On Friday, we said, this building's condemned. You can't put people there. And instead, they took control of the building, got a court order, and forced and allowed people to live in these conditions. What we've seen is a blatant disregard to the city's inspections and subsequent condemnation of the 101 Broadway, and more importantly, we've seen the county turn its back on the health and well-being of our region's homeless. This is a tragedy in the making, especially with the cold weather coming upon us. What this county is doing is immoral. The county needs to live up to the legal and moral obligations of serving the region's homeless, not just in Yonkers, but for the entire county. We all pay taxes towards the services that are being provided here, each and every one of us, especially in the city of Yonkers. And the county is supposed to provide them, and they have not. And as a city, we need to safeguard our homeless. We need to make sure that we take care of the people in our community, whether they live in a homeless shelter, live outside a homeless shelter, whether they want to walk up and down the street in Getty Square, free from any type of situation where somebody might want to bury a 12-inch knife in their chest. So I call on the New York State Housing and Community Renewal and our state controller to look into these issues immediately. The county needs to take responsibility and treat these individuals humanely. And to provide more details on why this is so urgent, I've asked the police, fire, and the buildings commissioner all to speak, and also all to take questions today. So let me start off with our police commissioner, Charles Garner.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me begin by saying that homelessness is an unfortunate and multifaceted issue facing communities throughout the country. We find that homeless populations include individuals suffering from physical disabilities, mental illness, and substance abuse, or a combination thereof, complicating our ability to address the issue from a public safety perspective. And what I'd like to do is offer you a police perspective of what we're seeing here in the city of Yonkers. The majority of the homeless population in Yonkers is concentrated in one area, the downtown Getty Square area, which is located in the northwest section of the city. Getty Square contains several homeless shelters and facilities, as well as a number of service providers, including the Salvation Army, Department of Social Services, drug treatment centers, Veterans Administration, Public Library, and many more. The area has a large transient population, many of whom are homeless. As a result, many people migrate to the streets and surrounding areas, sleeping in parks and secluded areas by the riverfront, particularly during the warm weather months. We in the police department receive constant complaints from residents, business owners, downtown business district, community, civic, and government organizations, including complaints of disorderly persons, aggressive panhandling, trespassing, urinating and defecating in public, sexual conduct in public, disputes, and drug overdoses. And some specific examples of our library experiences: people defecating and urinating on the ramp leading to the front door, disorderly persons inside the premises, and people watching pornography on the library computers. Our banks experience people urinating and sleeping in ATM vestibules. Our parks department experiences individuals trespassing on our city pier and vandalizing our public restrooms. So in response to these conditions, we had to deploy additional police resources to the area. And in addition to the traditional law enforcement response, several years ago we formed a Yonkers Police Department homeless outreach team, which is comprised of 2 specially trained officers and a Westchester County mental health expert who are charged with trying to engage homeless persons to try to secure lodging and get them streamlined access to the services that are available to us. They routinely facilitate 10 to 12 interactions per day. And although our homeless outreach team has been able to help many individuals, we continue to receive complaints, as I just described. So as the primary law enforcement agency for public safety in the city of Yonkers, since May of 2016, police officers in Getty Square have issued over 1,300 city ordinance violations, including open alcohol containers, encumbering the sidewalk, littering, discharge of raw human sewage, possession of K2, and others. And during that period, over 200 individuals have been arrested in that area, and the majority of those arrests occurring were involving homeless individuals. We also received a disproportionate number of calls for service from the homeless shelters in the area, the main shelter being the sharing community at 1 Hudson Street. And since January of 2015, we have responded to over 1,000 calls for service at that site, including calls of assaults, disputes, emotionally disturbed persons, larcenies, medical calls, and others. We currently have 58 active arrest warrants for individuals who have listed the sharing community as their address, 5 level 3 sex offenders utilizing their services, and on September 12th, as the mayor mentioned, a dispute occurred in front of 1 Hudson Street, resulting in a 49-year-old homeless individual being stabbed to death. A second homeless shelter located at 101 North Broadway, which we believe is associated with the sharing community, had 73 calls for service during that same time period. As you can imagine, responding to and mitigating these situations greatly impacts our department's resources. But despite our efforts, we are seeing an increase in the number of homeless individuals in the area, and upon conducting inspections of these facilities located at 1 Hudson and 101 North Broadway, we found them to be significantly overcrowded and what my officers described as deplorable conditions. I believe that the overcrowding and deplorable conditions found that these shelters are contributing to the disputes and the homeless-related complaints that we are receiving, and that matter needs to be addressed. But despite these challenges, the police department will continue to address complaints and work to the best of our ability to provide a safe environment for all the people in the downtown Getty Square area.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a quick point. The sharing community, the people that work in the sharing community, especially those who volunteer there, are angels from God, and they do a great job. And then their job, and they're doing a great job in spite of the fact that they're not getting the resources that they need. And that's where the county comes in, and that's our issue. Our issue is with Westchester County and them putting our people in conditions they should not be in. I'd like to ask the Fire Commissioner to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. This week, beginning Wednesday, the Yonkers Fire Department and its fire prevention inspectors were part of a task force, a joint task force with the Yonkers Police Department and the Yonkers Buildings Division to inspect these 2 locations. And our task is to enforce the fire code, which basically ensures the safety of the residents contained within these locations. And not to get too deep into the weeds, but on the 1 Hudson Street location, our inspectors wrote 8 code violations of different infractions out there. And the 101 North Broadway, we wrote 13 code violations, and we were unable to inspect the whole building because the inspections occurred at nighttime. The majority of the building was dimly lit, where the lights were not functioning as required by the state code. And also there were people sleeping in places, and we were asked not to disturb the residents. So there may be many more violations out there, and we were unable to uncover during these inspections. We tried to go back Saturday afternoon during daylight hours to address and access the whole building and do a complete inspection, but we denied access by the responsible parties on the premise at these locations. And to that end, I'm going to be a little briefer than the police commissioner, but the violations out there, some of them you see the pictures here, illegal wiring, substandard egress, people sleeping in the means of egress. These are all transient visitors to these locations. They may not be familiar with the layout of these occupancies that they're residing in for a couple hours or a few nights during the week there. And something happens in the middle of the night, the lights are not functioning, they don't know how to get out, things are going to go south in a hurry there. So they're putting people in harm's way unnecessarily. this could be resolved very easily. They can address the code violations. At least they'd be in a safer place. The occupancy as well. Both times we were there Wednesday and Thursday night. They were already legal certificate of occupancy for residents within those 2 locations there. And then Friday we weren't able to get into the site. We could not verify what the occupancy was as well. But there are many hazards out there that need to be addressed immediately to address the safety of these people, these poor unfortunate souls that are taking use of these 2 locations within Yonkers. Thank you.
Bill Snyder.
Well, as you heard from Commissioner Sweeney, my staff accompanied them on these task force inspections, and we wrote the same violations regarding those. Specifically at 101 North Broadway, you can see the photos here of some of the conditions, particularly on the hot water heater. The type of soot definitely indicates that the products of combustion are not getting properly out of the building. Similarly, although I don't see a photo, but the boiler itself, which will provide the heat at this upcoming winter, is in terrible disrepair, and I don't know if it runs. We're unable to test that. Part of the reason we weren't able to test that is because that building is part of what we call our temporary residence program, and they have not received a temporary residence permit. In fact, they haven't applied for it yet for this year. And that's our vehicle. That's how we go into these facilities that are rooming houses and hotels, and we check to make sure that all of the systems there work. That's how we do it. And when we find that they're acceptable, we issue a temporary residence permit, and they'd be able to reside there. This facility doesn't have that, so we're not sure if it's safe. And based on what we've seen here, we've come to the conclusion that it is not. Now, until they do need to bring in people to maintain this building properly, if they maintain it properly and they apply for a temporary residence permit, then we can grant that. And then they can occupy per their certificate of occupancy, which does say 26 rooms at 101 North Broadway. Problems at 1 Hudson Street were mainly overcrowding, having 37 people in the cafeteria area and in the hallways, as was previously described. That space is not designed for people to sleep in. It's a cafeteria, and that's the purpose. That's why it was overcrowding. They're just not permitted to sleep there. Well, thank you very much.
We have our councilman for the 1st District, Christopher Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. On Saturday night, going into Sunday, I saw a few Facebook posts about the sharing community and what was going on at the location. As heard by the commissioners and the mayor prior, there were some issues that needed to be addressed at 2 locations in particular. Upon arriving, I was witness to 13 individuals, 13 people, human beings, men and women like you and I, sleeping outside. Why? Because we do not have the capacity, we do not have the facilities, we do not have the proper, viable, acceptable locations for people to spend the night when they don't have a place to live. We're not the only community with this problem. Some people who needed shelter, who could not spend one night outside. For example, a pregnant woman was sent to New Rochelle, and New Rochelle was full. There were people sleeping on the floor there. And so we have a problem throughout this county. We have a problem that really needs to be addressed. And this problem, although exacerbated by bad air quality and improper entrance and egress, is really a human problem. It is us as a society, us as a city, mostly us as a county, because that's where the responsibility lies, not following through on our responsibility to take care of our fellow man. Yes, these people, these individuals have had hard times in their lives, which make them more susceptible to negative interactions, whether it be fights and arguing and unfortunate urination or defecation in areas where they otherwise wouldn't. But we need to recognize that those negative situations don't come from their desire to do that. They come from a reality which says they don't have a place to call their home. They don't have the ability or the capacity because of mental illness to set themselves up and make sure that they have the ability to survive. And when someone is in that situation, it is our responsibility as government to step up and step forward. I commend these men behind me because in doing their jobs, they're recognizing that these conditions are unsafe. Not unsafe for homeless people, unsafe for people. Unsafe for you and I to live, to spend the night in, and therefore unsafe for anyone else who would otherwise be on the street as well. What we need to do, however, at this moment, is to make sure, is to guarantee that the dozens of people who are sleeping in our downtown, in parks and crevices, under awnings to stay away from the wind and the rain, is to make sure that they have a place to go. And anything short of that means we're not following through on our responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Johnson, and Minority Leader, City Council, Mike Sabatino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, this is an extremely unfortunate situation. I'm sure all of us as human beings are disturbed when situations like this occur. And here we have a situation where we have compromised individuals, and they're being forced into settings that only compromise their lives even more. And as my colleague said, we have a responsibility to care for these people, but we're putting them in more danger given the circumstances that they have to be sheltered in. And it's just totally unacceptable. And I think one of the big things that we have to address as a nation, because this is a national problem, as well is we have to do something about the mental health care system in this country. You cannot expect a person with mental health disease to go into a facility and be released in 30 days. So that's the bigger picture. We have to address the mental health care in this country, and we have to address programs that get the mentally ill back on their feet, well, and becoming productive citizens in this country and in this city. Unfortunately, something like this has to happen to bring the situation to everyone's attention. And the worst thing that we want is we don't want these individuals to suffer any more than they're already suffering. But something has to be done on the county level, and I'm hoping that it'll be done soon and quickly. We cannot have our homeless people living in conditions like this. Thank you.
All right, any questions from the press?
Mayor, I just spoke to County Executive Pasquarino. He said the health department inspected all these shelters. They all passed, they're all compliant. And what you're doing today is playing politics with the lives of people who least need it.
Okay, I'm going to start by letting the building commissioner answer. Here's one question. Did you hear it? You want me to do it?
Well, certainly,
Can you say your name again, please?
my name is William Schneider.
Only because it deals, you were talking about different permits that were filed for.
Yeah, he said the health department said they passed inspection.
Right, well, certainly they may be looking under different codes. Certainly they're looking under the Westchester County Sanitary Code. But we enforce the New York State Building Code here in the city of Yonkers. And the city of Yonkers has the authority to do that, as far as I know, and not the county of Westchester, and that's what we follow. And we also enforce our city building and housing codes. Wherever the state codes leave off, that's where the city codes kick in. And as I mentioned before, Chapter 58 is our housing ordinance, which requires that you get a temporary residence permit before you occupy a building. And as I mentioned before, that's how we make sure that it's safe. We test the smoke detection system, we test the sprinkler, or we have them tested by the professionals that do that testing. We inspect each room to make sure that it's habitable. For building code issues, like ventilation issues, heating issues, structural issues, which my people are all certified code enforcement officials that they train for every year. Right? Some of them, for instance, if the fire inspector is a professional engineer in the state of New York, these people are trained for these type of inspections. And while I have utmost respect for the sanitarians for Westchester County Department of Health, they are excellent in their public health and sanitary code. But here, since we're the enforcement agency for the building code, I would say that we were the authority to make that decision.
So are you saying 1 Hudson and 101 Broadway are not habitable?
No, 101 North Broadway at this time is not habitable, in our opinion. 1 Hudson Street, however, doesn't have that same issue. That was an overcrowding issue, which was then subsequently resolved during additional inspections.
Now that you got, if you don't mind, because I'd like to answer the question, but I wanted to at least have him give you the legal interpretation. What a crock. I mean, really, you gotta be kidding me. That it's healthy to walk into. First of all, you can't take a facility built for 18 people, cram 50 people into it, and then say, mission accomplished. That's what they're saying. You can't say it's okay to block and to not have smoke alarms. All right, so it's cleaning up what? To walk into, but if there's a fire during the night, you die because of fire, and somehow the county has kind of abdicated their responsibility to the Department of Health when there are local authorities that are in charge. Listen, if that building burns down to the ground,
Which building are you referring to?
101, any one of them, but if that building burns down to the ground, it is the responsibility of me and the council. You know why? Because we are charged with safeguarding the people of this community in and out of that facility. Now, if they think their job is done because they crammed a whole bunch of people into one facility while closing the one in Mount Pleasant, saying that they had excess capacity, well then, you know what? I hope you can sleep at night. But at the end of the day, these people are living in inhumane conditions. It's wrong. The county gets paid. The county gets tax dollars, they get federal dollars, they get state dollars. We here in Yonkers are county taxpayers, and we expect them to do their job.
Well, he's saying you should come up with your own solutions, because a lot of people who are not in the system are coming to those facilities. That's why there's so much overcrowding.
We have been there to these county facilities, as you saw, more than 1,000 times. We have actually spent the dollars on caretaking these facilities. Last night was the first time a county cop has ever seen 101. As a matter of fact, a few hours before, someone actually needed medical assistance. We applied, we took care of that, not the county, but yet the county came in to make sure that the first responders couldn't go inside. Why? What do they want to hide? They should not want to hide a thing. It should be transparent. Just because somebody is homeless doesn't give anyone the right to treat them any less than any citizen in this county. And that's what's happening here. We're not going to accept it. And so we will continue to do things that we're doing. To have overcrowding on 1 Hudson Street and then deal with a gentleman having a 12-inch knife plunged into his chest in broad daylight in Getty Square. Was that because of overcrowding? Was that because of, what was it for? We need to find out. You know, oh, the bathroom was clean enough for them to use. Thanks to the Department of Health, we're glad you came. But it didn't solve any of the other issues. And again, anyone to make any other suggestion, looking at this, looking at the fact that the building was condemned, looking at the fact that the building was condemned and the county signed a contract taking over that facility on the day that we asked them to do something about it so that they could take jurisdiction over that building and keep the people out of it, the people that are charged with protecting that building, and to keep them out of it. If that building burned down that night, we had an officer there, a firefighter there, that was told to stay outside. If that building had burned down that night, who would be responsible for the deaths of the individuals that were there?
What's really going on here? We're hearing both sides of what's important this afternoon.
Yeah, we're in court, and there was again, what we talked about before, when this matter was brought to their attention on Friday, the county did 2 things. They exited a contract they had with Sharing Community, 18 days, and then entered into a new contract with the owner of that condemned building Friday late in the afternoon, without going to the county board of legislators, without going through board and contracts, all the different things that are safeguards for the government. Didn't do any of that. And then, of course, went and issued to a judge and ordered that facility opened, even though it was not fit for human habitation.
We We spoke to the executive director of Hudson. She seemed a little surprised by what's happening here today in the assertion.
This week, someone from the sharing community buried a 12-inch knife into the chest of someone else from the community. Last week, someone from that same community flatlined in our public library bathroom. Our job is to protect everyone, whether you're in that shelter or out of that shelter. Clearly, there are issues that are not being addressed. And if they're being addressed, I wish they'd come back and tell us. Because most of what you see here came from the county of Westchester when they did their inspection.
So what is the solution would you like to
the
see?
solution is really simple. Treat our homeless like you would treat a member of your family. And stop thinking just because you've stored people like sardines in a facility that your job is done. It's not. And we'll continue to do the things we need to do, but at the same time, we need to depend on Westchester County to do their job. It's kind of like, read it like this. We'd love to have 3 more companies, right, in the city of Yonkers, 3 more fire companies. I'm not going to go to the county and say, give me 3 more fire companies, because they're going to say that's your responsibility. Yonkers is in charge of the safety from people in Yonkers when it comes to fire services. Westchester County is in charge of making sure that our homeless are housed in a humane way. We'll protect them, but they need to do their job.
Mayor, I have a question. A lot of people now will look at your pictures and it's deplorable, but some dispute that it's very deplorable or inhumane to keep them on the street, sleeping on the street. That's also terrible. If not there, where should they go? Where do you tell them to go?
I have to tell you, this has been going on for a couple of years, and judging by some of the things I've seen, I think I'd rather sleep on the street than sleep in some of those buildings. Now, that being said, we need to continue our pressure on Westchester County to do their jobs. And in the meantime, if the Westchester is looking for additional help from this administration, from the city, over and beyond what we've already done, we're willing to work.
But you also speak about safety. Now you have homeless sleeping all over the place. Now they're not contained to one area. Doesn't that put the Yonkers people more in danger than before? Because now you have them all over, in parks and here and there, so they're all over the place.
Last night I drove around and I didn't see anybody sleeping in parks. Let me tell you, there were 3 days to the question here. The first day when the city went and did the inspections, then there was Saturday, no inspections were done. But oddly enough, there were homeless outside of the Hudson St sleeping in cots or on the floor or what have you. I don't know if that was staged or if that was real. I do know that vans were there on Friday to pick people up if they were turned away. On Sunday, which is last night, I went personally out. I went to Hudson St, I went to 101, and I drove around. I did not see any issues.
Well, Mayor, I can tell you that I was there Saturday night, and I was the one who documented, filmed, and interviewed, and it was not staged. People were there sleeping. Some did not have a car. They were sleeping on the floor. So there was not staged, and I would suggest you go to YonkersVoice.com and view, and hear what the people of Yonkers, some of the people of Yonkers are saying. That this is more political than actually regarding to the safety that you're talking about.
Yeah, we are actually on the same side, you and I. And so what I want to do is make sure that people are not in inhumane conditions. And so why they ended up on the streets, they shouldn't be on the streets. We have, and that's a good question for the county. Say, why is it that you allow people on the street? Because that's the question we're asking them. So I hope that you as a reporter will do the same thing.
Just for the record, how many homeless shelters? 6 county-funded homeless shelters are in Yonkers?
There's 2 drop-in centers. I'm not sure what the figures are. Yeah. We'll get you a list. We'll get you a list.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.